Jack leaned back in his favorite armchair, sipping tea and savoring the golden rays of the afternoon sun streaming through the window. Retirement had been kind to him. After decades of teaching history to lively high school students, he now enjoyed peaceful days filled with gardening, reading, and the occasional game of chess at the community center. As he reached for the day's mail, a particular envelope caught his attention. It was unusually glossy, with bold letters that read, "Exclusive opportunity for financial freedom." Curious, Jack opened it. Inside was a brochure boasting incredible returns on investment. Words like guaranteed profits, secure future, and limited time offer jumped off the page. "Honey, what's that?" Mary called from the kitchen where she was peeling apples for a pie. "It's an investment opportunity," Jack replied, scanning the brochure. "They claim I can double my money in 6 months. Isn't that something?" Mary walked into the living room, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at the brochure and frowned. "Sounds too good to be true. Jack, you know better than to trust these things." Jack chuckled. "You always think the worst. Look, they've got testimonials and a professional-looking website link. Maybe it's worth exploring." Mary sighed, shaking her head. "Remember what happened to Ted from church? He lost half his savings in a similar scheme. I'd steer clear." But Jack's curiosity was piqued. The brochure spoke of a revolutionary technology company poised to disrupt the market. "Besides," he reasoned, "I've got some savings I'm not using. Why not take a small risk? I'll do my research." Mary threw her hands up in mock exasperation. "Fine, but don't come crying to me if it goes south." Jack laughed and tucked the brochure into his desk drawer, already planning to check out the website after dinner. The thrill of a potential adventure lit a spark in his otherwise routine life. Little did he know, this small decision would lead to something far more significant than a financial gamble. Jack couldn't stop thinking about the investment opportunity. The promises of extraordinary returns played on a loop in his mind. The brochure lay neatly folded on his desk, but its words seemed to echo in the back of his head every waking moment. One evening, after Mary had gone to bed, Jack powered up the computer. He navigated to the website mentioned in the brochure. It was sleek, professional, and filled with glowing testimonials from supposed investors. Photos of smiling families, luxury cars, and vacation homes flooded the screen. It was hard not to feel tempted. "Just a small amount," Jack muttered to himself as he entered his details and wired a modest sum from his savings. Enough to test the waters. At first, everything seemed perfect. Within a week, Jack received an email claiming his investment had grown by 15%. He was thrilled. Over the next month, he transferred more money, believing he had finally stumbled upon the golden ticket to secure his and Mary's retirement. But as Jack's involvement deepened, things at home began to change. Mary noticed it first in small, seemingly insignificant ways. Jack, who had always been meticulous about paying bills on time, let their electricity bill lapse. When she reminded him, he brushed it off. "I'm busy tracking my returns, Mary," he said with a dismissive wave. "I'll take care of it later." Later came and went. Mary had to handle it herself. Then came the missed doctor's appointment. Jack, who prided himself on punctuality, simply forgot. "I had too much on my mind," he explained, though his mind had always been sharp, even under stress. At dinner, Jack began repeating himself, asking Mary questions she'd answered moments earlier. When she pointed it out, he laughed nervously. "Guess I'm getting old," he said, but his eyes didn't carry the humor his words suggested. Mary grew more concerned when Jack began avoiding conversations about the investment. "How much have you put in, Jack?" she asked one evening, her tone cautious but firm. "Not much. Don't worry about it," he replied, refusing to meet her eyes. "I want specifics," she insisted. Jack's face hardened. "It's my money, Mary. I know what I'm doing." The sharpness in his voice startled her. Jack had never spoken to her that way before. Over the weeks, Jack's obsession with the investment consumed more of his time. He stopped tending the garden he once loved. The chessboard gathered dust. Instead, he spent hours refreshing the website, watching the supposed returns climb higher. Mary tried to intervene, urging him to consult a financial advisor or even their bank. "This doesn't feel right, Jack. Please, let's talk to someone," she pleaded. But Jack refused. "I'm fine, Mary. You're overreacting." The tipping point came one rainy afternoon. Mary found a letter from their bank stating that a significant withdrawal had been made without her knowledge. When she confronted Jack, he shrugged. "I told you, Mary, it's an investment," he said, his tone impatient. "But Jack, this is almost half of our savings," Mary exclaimed, her voice trembling. "You just don't understand," he snapped. "I know what I'm doing." Mary's heart sank. She knew this wasn't just about money anymore. Jack's behavior was changing in ways she couldn't ignore. The man she had loved and relied on for decades was slipping away, and she didn't know how to stop it. As the storm outside intensified, so did Mary's resolve. She knew she couldn't let this continue, even if Jack refused to see the danger. Something deeper was at play, and she was determined to uncover the truth. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Mary stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes as the radio played softly in the background. Jack sat at the dining table, staring blankly at the newspaper, seemingly lost in thought. Next, a warning for retirees. The announcer's voice cut through the hum of the coffee machine. Mary paused, spatula in hand. A fraudulent investment scheme has been targeting older adults, promising unrealistic returns. Authorities report that the so-called Ever-Sure Fund has scammed hundreds of victims nationwide. Mary froze. "Jack," she called, turning off the stove. "Did they say Ever-Sure?" Jack looked up, his brow furrowing. "I think that's the name of my investment fund. Why?" Mary's heart sank. She rushed to the living room and turned on the TV. The news segment showed grim-faced victims recounting their losses. An expert explained how the scammers had created an illusion of legitimacy with professional websites, fake testimonials, and fabricated growth reports. "Jack, this is serious," Mary exclaimed, her voice trembling. "We need to check your account." They sat together at the computer. Mary watched as Jack logged into his account, only to be greeted by an error message. "This website is no longer active." "Maybe it's a server issue," Jack mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. He checked his email for updates, only to find his inbox flooded with warnings from other victims. I don't understand," Jack stammered. "They said it was safe. I saw the profits." "Jack, how much did you put in?" Mary asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. "Most of our savings," he admitted, unable to meet her eyes. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Mary noticed something strange. Jack seemed detached. He wasn't just upset, he was confused. The next day, as Mary tried to piece together their finances, she asked Jack to recall the timeline of his investments. "I only put in a little," he insisted, "and I think I pulled it out weeks ago." Mary frowned. "Jack, we just saw your bank statements. You kept transferring money until last week." "No, I didn't," Jack snapped defensively. "That's not right. I'd never do that without telling you." But he had. The evidence was undeniable, yet Jack's conviction in his version of events was unshakable. That evening, Mary sat alone in the living room, her thoughts racing. Jack's confusion, his defensiveness, and the recent lapses in his memory painted a troubling picture. Could this be more than just a mistake? She whispered to herself. Her mind drifted to articles she'd read about cognitive decline. Was it possible that Jack's poor financial decisions were a symptom of something deeper? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Mary decided it was time for Jack to see a doctor. The loss of their savings was devastating, but what frightened her most was the thought of losing Jack himself. The week after the scam was exposed, Mary sat at the kitchen table staring at a steaming cup of tea that had gone cold. Jack had been quiet, too quiet. His usual cheerfulness was replaced with a cloud of confusion and shame. But something deeper nagged at Mary. His forgetfulness, the missed bills, his inability to recognize the scam. It all felt like more than just a lapse in judgment. "Jack," Mary began gently, sitting beside him on the couch. "I think we should see a doctor." Jack frowned. "A doctor? Why? I'm fine. I just made a mistake, Mary. Everyone does." Mary placed a comforting hand on his arm. "This isn't just about the investment. You've been forgetting things, important things. I think we need to figure out what's going on." Reluctantly, Jack agreed. A week later, they sat in a neurologist's office. The doctor, a kind woman in her 40s, asked Jack a series of questions about his memory and decision-making. Mary filled in the gaps, recounting the missed appointments, the unpaid bills, and the strange behavior leading up to the scam. After several tests and a lengthy discussion, the doctor leaned forward, her expression serious yet compassionate. "Jack, based on the results, it's possible you're in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. One of the early symptoms we see is impaired judgment, which could explain your difficulties with financial decisions." The words hung heavy in the air. Jack blinked as though struggling to process what he'd just heard. "Alzheimer's?" he echoed. "But I feel fine. I can't have that." Mary reached for his hand, her own trembling slightly. "What does this mean for us?" she asked. The doctor explained that while there was no cure, early detection allowed for planning and intervention. "There are medications that can help slow progression and support groups for both of you," she said. "But it's crucial to organize your affairs, financially and personally." On the drive home, neither Jack nor Mary spoke much. The gravity of the diagnosis settled over them like a thick fog. But as they pulled into their driveway, Mary took a deep breath. "Jack," she said, turning to him, "we've faced challenges before. We'll face this one too, but we need to work together." Jack nodded, his eyes glassy but resolute. "I'm sorry, Mary," he whispered. "For everything." Mary smiled gently. "We'll get through it, one step at a time." That evening, they sat down together to review their finances. Mary called their bank to secure their remaining accounts, and they began researching Alzheimer's support groups. It was a small but vital step toward regaining control of their lives, and for the first time in weeks, Mary felt a glimmer of hope. The first few weeks after Jack's diagnosis were the hardest. He struggled to accept the reality of his condition, and the guilt over the lost savings weighed heavily on him. Mary, however, refused to let him sink into despair. She took charge with her characteristic determination, researching everything she could about Alzheimer's, and creating a plan to support Jack in every way possible. One evening, Mary showed Jack a flyer for a community workshop on preventing elder financial fraud. "They're looking for speakers," she said. "Why don't you share your story? You could help others avoid the same mistakes." Jack hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the flyer. "I don't know, Mary. What if people think I'm just foolish?" Mary smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not foolish, Jack. You're brave. It takes courage to admit you were wrong, and even more to help others learn from it." With Mary's encouragement, Jack agreed. At the workshop, Jack stood before a small crowd of retirees and their families. Nervously, he recounted his experience with the scam, his missteps, and his diagnosis. He spoke candidly about how subtle memory lapses and impaired judgment had clouded his decisions, leading him into the trap. "But this isn't the end of my story," Jack said, his voice steadier now. "I'm learning to adapt, with the help of my wife, my doctor, and my community. And if sharing my experience can save even one of you from falling into the same trap, then it's worth it." The room erupted in applause, and Jack felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in weeks, a sense of purpose. At home, Jack and Mary began to adjust their lifestyle. They simplified their finances, consolidating accounts and setting up automatic bill payments. Mary took over handling major decisions, but Jack remained involved in smaller tasks to keep his mind active. They also found joy in simple routines, walks in the park, cooking together, and playing board games that challenged Jack's memory in fun ways. Over time, Jack's advocacy work grew. He collaborated with local organizations to create awareness campaigns about elder fraud and Alzheimer's symptoms. Mary often joined him, sharing her perspective as a caregiver. Their shared mission brought them closer, transforming what had been a painful chapter into a story of resilience and hope.